Resist what stands in the way of love, justice, and healing.
Repair and reclaim right relationships.
Reimagine what's possible.
And regenerate the land and our spirit. Welcome to the ReGeneration Nation podcast. Hi, y'all. My name is Jess Alvarez Parfrey. I'm currently serving as Executive Director of Transition US. And honestly, this podcast has been a dream for quite some time now within our organization. And I feel like we finally have the right team to put the energy behind this offering that we need to get it out to as many listeners as possible. We're also just really excited to uplift the voices and visions of the regenerative communities movement, folks who are already doing the on-the-ground work to let us know that not only is another world possible, this world is here and it's happening right now. So the intention, at least the intention that I really resonate with, is providing space for new stories, a new vision for what we can all contribute to in terms of a better world, a more regenerative and just world. So I'm excited to get into it with the crew.
Yes, hi everyone. My name is Elvia, she, her pronouns, and I'm the communications and outreach lead for Transition US. I'm excited that you are all here listening to this podcast today. I always think back to how I was stuck on this climate doom perspective narrative for quite a while, and it wasn't until I started leaning into community and working with community on issues related to environmental justice that I was able to start getting out of that mindset and instead just, focus on okay, what can we do right now to make sure that when the collapse happens, if anything, that we as a community are grounded on love and justice and instead support one another and be there for one another. So I'm very into learning more about cooperatives and alternative economies of care, and I hope that through this podcast we're able to engage you with the emerging regenerative community and environmental justice movement and feel inspired to work with your local communities or organizations that are building a better world established on love and justice. And for this first episode, we wanted to explore the four themes of resist, repair, reimagine, and regenerate that guide our work.
Hello, everyone. My name is Gabi. I use they, she pronouns, and I'm one of the network organizers with Transition US. I guess a bit about me because I always like to disclose my astrology chart. I'm a Cancer sun, Sagittarius rising, and Capricorn moon. So take whatever info from that you will. Yeah, I'm very excited to be here, and I think there's definitely a turning point. Just a shift in our society and just collective consciousness um, of wanting something better and acknowledging the harm in these current systems and just wanting to be there for one another, healing and otherwise. And there's amazing work being done, all throughout the world, in our own very communities. I'm sure, individuals are doing amazing work, even just day-to-day lives. It's just a different shift. So excited to explore that with all of you and just highlight the work that's being done.
Hi, my name's Alex. I go by he, him pronouns. I'm a network organizer with Transition US. And again, just trying to get into, the four R's, the theme of resist, repair, reimagine, and regenerate. Kind of share a lot of my journey and experiences in regards to these themes. And then also, here to learn from, this panelist. So one of the first themes, of the R's is resist, and for me, what resist means is basically, just I guess resisting everything that I was told I had to do, resisting, the cradle to prison pipeline, resisting, the machismo, resisting the violence, resisting the corporate professionalism, I guess, outlook on life, and I guess just resisting whatever didn't feel right to me, whatever got whatever kind of like stood in the way of love, justice, and healing, in a sense, so everything that didn't feel right to me internally, um yeah, I guess, I resisted it.
Yeah, the theme of resistance, I think, Alex, you spoke to it really beautifully. Like, it means saying no to harm, it means saying no to some people being valued less than others. It means saying no to the status quo, like this belief that this is as good as it can get, because we know that's not true. So I think any small action that we can take in the name of resistance really helps to create the space to reimagine new alternatives. So I think resistance can be done in many different ways. It can be a protest. It can be, a blockade in terms of like, nonviolent direct action. It could also be this recommitment to healing when so many things around you don't focus or emphasize that work. So it's kind of making space to help seed new worlds. That's how I think of resistance.
Yes, I think that the aspect of recommitting to like healing and what that looks like. I think resistance to me is almost like what you wouldn't expect, but like slow living and just taking your time. At least for me, in like my healing journey with my autoimmune and whatnot. It's just I see this new resistance to the urgency that capitalism puts upon us. Like, no, I'm not going to sacrifice, my bodily needs for a like a deadline or a meeting or instead I'm going to prioritize like my health. I'm going to prioritize the relationships in my life, which I've been told to just put them aside and isolate. So really just that like reassessment of everything. I see as resistance, and I see a lot of people doing it now. I know I'm 22 years old, and everybody like I don't want to say everybody, but like people still like convinced that capitalism's the go-to system is like, oh my gosh, nobody wants to work. It's like, okay, but like, what does that even mean? Um, Work for whom? These like about to be trillionaires? Work to make yourself like sick, which we've seen how like trauma and ignoring your body can make you physically like sick and manifest an illness, and there's lots of research on that. Like, yeah, why would you want to work in a system like that? So it goes far beyond that, and I think just I am seeing a huge resistance in that. Yeah.
Being on the concept of resist, I feel like I've always like even before I started leaning into environmental justice, I feel like I've always had this whole like perspective that a lot of things are human constructs and social constructs, and I think like digging deeper and like trying to analyze where does all of this beliefs come from. And I feel like at the end of the day a lot of it comes from colonization and capitalism and imperialism, and it's just like having to analyze certain traditions even, or just in general people's beliefs, and just knowing that like a better world is possible that is founded on love and justice. And building communities of cares is so important right now, and I think providing this alternative vision, alternative reality of what is possible is so important, so that people that maybe are not necessarily digging deeper could look and look to those alternatives and just start slowly putting those pieces together and realize like, oh yeah, like we don't have to be working every day, we don't have to be doing all this extractive economy, culture, like that's just even, yeah, like just different ways. And I think like also nature is very inspiring in general. And I think looking into how nature and the systems that they have already and how they've learned from each other to build this for so many years, centuries, and we have a lot to learn from nature in general.
I think that's a great point, and I think my hope is that in sharing the stories of folks who are thinking in a decolonized way, folks who are actively, I'm thinking of the work of the US Solidarity Economy Network, and they have their mantra is resist and build. So not only do we need to resist those systems that are deeply embedded in fragmentation and extraction and oppression, we need to also build the new systems together. So that's one org I want to plug. But in terms of like how we look for different routes forward, there are folks doing that work, and so I would love to see us have more of those connections happen because of the podcast and like conversations that maybe we could inspire, and deeper exploration on the part of folks who are doing work in their communities.
Yeah, and this is going into like our next theme of repair. It seems like our entire lives we've been told like, oh, like, end of capitalism, like there is not another world, this is the world, right? And just it made it seem so difficult to imagine what another world could look like, could exist. But now all of a sudden we have this, almost like rolling ball of momentum of like folks are like, actually this is like a lie that we've been told our entire life. And it doesn't have to be this grand, like, you know, I want to say like this grand goal, like unachievable goal. I just, when you have a goal, and it's quite ambitious, like it can be quite overwhelming. And one of the things to help you reach that goal, whether it's like saving money, whether it's, wanting to incorporate like wellness, health and wellness in your life, whatever it is, you do it in increments. So going into repairing our world, it can be incremental. It can start with you. Um, I was reading this book by this popular psychoanalyst, Mary Esther Harding, and the book was Women's Mysteries, Ancient and Modern. And she kind of takes this like intersectional, she takes a feminist lens on this psychological theory where in order to heal yourself, you bring like your unconscious and your conscious like together. So just like fully aware of oneself. And in like healing your shadow self and just like acknowledging all the pain and all the trauma and like just how that manifests in your conscious like world, aligning that and healing that, then you can start to really just like heal the world around you. Because the theory, it's called like the Jung theory by Carl Jung, the famous psychoanalyst. And he was basically saying that there is like this line of almost like this underlying theme across all ages and time of there is like this collective unconscious and consciousness that like reflects into our reality, and like we have the power to kind of like shift our reality, but we just need to kind of like tap in. So I definitely think, starting with oneself, like healing the intergenerational trauma that's been put upon us through generations of colonialism. We're carrying a lot, and healing that, I think if we are part of nature, then in a sense we're healing nature by healing ourselves.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to talk about in terms of intergenerational trauma. Like, I think a lot of what our parents went through and our grandparents went through in terms of like even I feel like US imperialism has caused so much pain. Like so many, communities were moved out from their countries due to like war, due to like not being able to provide for themselves in the land that their parents grew up. And it's just, now it sucks a lot because a lot of people have moved a lot, like being forced to move from just their land that they've been there forever. And I think like I would say, looking into my own family, like my grandparents, my great grandparents, and my great great grandparents, they all lived in Oaxaca, they all lived in their pueblo. And for my parents, like they were forced to immigrate to Los Angeles because my brother got sick, and they didn't have, like, I guess, access to caring for him. And the doctors told my parents, you have to take him to US. And from there on, we've been living here, and unfortunately my brother passed away. But I feel like that, action of just staying here has just been just I don't know, just a lot of like the fact that my I sometimes think about my great grandma because she definitely influenced a lot of my mom, my grandma, and I never got to meet her. And it is interesting because I always feel sort of some kind of shame with the like on the fact that I don't know how to speak Zapotec, but I do know how to understand it. It just sucks a lot that like when I was younger, my teachers and everyone told my mom that I had to learn English. And so she like really encouraged me and my sisters to talk English all the time. And like it just sucks now because now I just don't know the language. And I think there's the whole like removal of language. And I definitely want to continue trying to learn and been trying to engage with my grandma and like speaking language. But I think there's just still a lot in terms of the trauma that my grandma carries, and my mom, my dad, and even like coming here, they carry a lot of stories with them, and like they've told me some of it. But yeah, I don't know. And I think like it also sucks a lot how stress due to the endless growth economy, and like basic needs are not being met because everything costs so much: housing, inadequate food systems, lack of accessible healthy foods, and just so many things. And a lot of people are getting sick, and even with COVID, even more people are getting sick. And we have to definitely work on repairing our health as a collective, right? And I think there's, like Dr. Rupa Maria definitely calls out on how a lot of people are trying to individually heal themselves. But I think we need to, as a collective, put the systems in place so that we could heal ourselves, with adequate housing. If we were to have like a roof and like access to good foods, then I think like a lot of people will start feeling better and start prioritizing their health, prioritizing their communities, and just loving each other. And I think like if we show that love that we have to our family on a bigger scale, and our community on a bigger scale to everyone, I definitely think like we would get to a place of just building communities of cares. And
You know, Elvia, you just reminded me of something while you were like talking about how like carrying on all this trauma from generations and like how people are getting sick. So I think of, like ES class, and I forget what the freaking pyramid is called, but basically we're taught about the metal accumulation pyramid of like, as you're going up the food pyramid, like metals, like mercury accumulate. Um, and I feel if we're taking lessons from like nature, I feel that that's how trauma, is carried down like generation through generation through our DNA. It like accumulates such to the point where more and more people are getting sick, or susceptible to like sickness. It's like our bodies are telling us like no more. Um, but yeah, I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, I was just gonna talk about like the whole theme of like repair, and for me it's like reconnection, and before America was established, for my people, the Mexica, uh, we we were first introduced to the settler colonialism, through the Spaniards and through the encomiendas and just kind of like thinking kind of like it happened before that, and also just with what you're saying with nature, these are all indigenous practices that were held before they came over here and decided to basically take all of our land. And yeah, like it's all connected. It's like, how do we connect ourselves to start healing, to start this intergenerational healing, because it's necessary, it's needed. Like I think as far as repair is, it's mainly reconnecting to how we used to be. And once we do, we realize that Mother Earth is our oldest ancestor, and we start repairing that relationship, then everything else, I think, in a sense, will follow.
I really resonate with what y'all have already named and shared. And yeah, I think for me, this theme of repair is an invitation to look to your own story for guidance about the type of role that you may play as a healer, as a truth teller, as a visionary. And not only are we carrying intergenerational trauma, we're also carrying intergenerational wisdom. And a big piece of that wisdom for folks who are living in right relationship to the earth, communities that we would describe as indigenous, and holding those traditions, and that, yeah, that reciprocal kind of connection. Um, yeah, is this recognition that the earth doesn't belong to us. We belong to the earth, and we belong to each other. So I really do feel that the repair work has to come in community, and your personal healing can be better supported and enabled when you have that strength and connection to community. And for me, that also includes beyond human community members, so the trees, the rivers, um, the creatures that we all are supposed to be living in right relationship with. And I also really feel strongly about land back and reparations and getting the space together needed to figure out how we can do that healing work, together and commit to it, because it is hard, but we need to do it.
I think like also another thing that reminds me about repair is that in order to repair our relationships with our earth, our health, and the intergenerational trauma, I feel like sometimes we have to sit with the grief. And I think there's a quote by Aisha Shilling for that I saw they recently posted on their story, and I feel like it just really grabbed my attention. And I think I'll just share parts of it right now. And it says, as we allow grief to continue to wash over us, we realize that we have been grieving for centuries. We grieve the devastating loss of our civilizations and culture and people, but perhaps we also grieve the distance between our potential for expansive beauty as humans and the choice that some make to enact violence and cruelty. We grieve the ways in which our oneness is forced and fragmented, and in naming that grief, we remember that there are some who want us to lose faith in humanity, to lose hope in our collective ability to do good. And in that realization, we recall that in reality, those who choose violence and fragmentation are the minority, that there's still vast numbers, the majority who choose peace and care and beauty. So maybe we regain a little bit of our faith in us, and we each take one action to extend love, care, and community to one another. And I think, like, even now with the recent shootings, like our community, everyone has been feeling that kind of grief, and it's just a lot. But I feel like it's been pretty heavy, and in order for us to just, I really like this quote because, like, there's a lot of violence, that comes and stems from like the whole U.S. imperialism. I come back to that, but like, just so much violence, and I think like yeah, I just really like this quote because it reminds me of there's some people that choose to participate in that violent system, but at the end, there's a lot of us that definitely want us to have those communities of care. And I think like I'm reminded by like working with you all that you're all amazing people, and there's even more amazing people that are doing that amazing work in other organizations. And I think like just partnering with them or talking to them, attending to their events, attending like other events in community, I think is super powerful. And just a reminder that, you know, love is everywhere and just choosing to participate in love every day. But I just want to express gratitude for you all. Yeah, even recording this and just getting to know you all more.
Thank you. I'm right back at you.
I'm still really feeling the wonderful conversation that we had with Jasmine Coe and Chiara Francesca, who are both amazing artists. And just this reminder that art it's all of our birthright. Like, we are all artists, and we all have so much tremendous power when we can tap into our creative potential and our imagination. And really finding ways to protect that and support, you know, the safe spaces that we need to really go there, and to leave behind those voices or those obstacles that tell us, you know, this is all we're going to get in this life, and really being able to, like, you know, tap into some kind of magic so that we can see those worlds that we're inching towards, and really it recommits us to the vision. So I just think it's also really important. I draw a lot of inspiration from little ones and from young people, like, you know, just the way that they can access that part of themselves. And we also talked about healing our inner child, as an important part of accessing our most artistic and creative selves too.
Yeah, I think just wanting to share with the listeners that we had a past Reimagine workshop that y'all could check out on our YouTube, and we'll post the link on this episode description. But we had Jasmine Coe and Chiara Francesca join us, and they're amazing artists, and we'll also share some of their art in the link. But yeah, I think like for me, they definitely really inspire my like the vision, the energy that is out there. And I think like when I look at their art, I feel like some sense of not just hope, but even more than that, just more like, yeah, like there's great people out there, and I definitely want to connect to everyone, with everyone, if anything. And I guess I want to also shout out hashtag Creative Wildfire, and they're a collaborative call to collective action from frontline communities represented by Climate Justice Alliance, Movement Generation, and New Economy Coalition. And last November, they organized a showcase that featured amazing artists such as Aisha Shillingford, America Dar, Jackie Fawn, and Chiara Francesca. And also Jasmine Coe drew, or I guess their art was on the front page of our first magazine, ReGeneration Nation magazine. So y'all could check it out there. But yeah, I just wanted to give you that little context just in case if you are new to transition US in general.
As we're going more into this theme of reimagination, I think when we look at the fact that the majority of the systems that we know fairly well, like our economy, they are not designed using the wisdom of the earth. In fact, they're designed in the exact opposite way. They are not life affirming. They are extractive. Um, and yeah, they're built off of these things called like externalities, where we kind of discount the impact to people and planet that comes from a lot of the economic activities that we put so much value into. So I just think that, like, for reimagination, like, it's also an important practice to like access our intuitive sense. And for me, like being out in the natural world, being comfortable and being at peace within myself helps me to see other alternatives. And for me, the alternatives are like, what are systems that actually allow us to thrive and to reach our full potential? What are systems that allow us to minimize suffering? What are systems that allow us to protect the earth? Um, yeah, so I really just think the imagination piece is so, so important. And whether we call it art or visioning or dreaming or whatever it exists in every one of us. And we all have a role to play, I believe, in doing this work.
But recently, I was, writing this this application, for this fellowship, and like I was kind of like getting, to like the art part, like thinking about like culinary arts, and I was thinking about like, like what culinary means, what's your first like opinion or thought on it. And the first thing, kind of like thought about was like food, and like what food means to me is like life, what art means to me is like culture. So, just I was thinking like in the whole realms, like of culinary art, of life and culture, and why food sovereignty, is so important, and trying to reimagine like our food systems, and for me, my main thing, I think, my lane is gonna always be in food sovereignty, um, because that's about it's about art and culture, and once we're able to take that back and reclaim it, we're going to be able to take back our autonomy. So for me, that was something that was pretty cool, just getting into it, and like seeing what art means and what food means.
If if folks are ready, I'm excited to talk about the last of the 4 R's, regenerate. Um, and I think for me, regeneration again is a reminder that the earth um, has so much wisdom to impart to us. The earth has already figured out the way that we need to configure ourselves to create a more just and thriving world. So, regeneration is speaking to these virtuous cycles that allow us all to meet our basic needs, to fulfill our highest potentials. And then it kind of provides the design logic that we need for new kinds of infrastructure, new ways of providing, again, for everyone's basic needs: housing, food, space for creative expression and culture making. That's what that last R is speaking to. Like, we can live in that place. Regeneration is a way of living and being. Um, and again, we've named the fact that there are so many beautiful examples of folks across the country, of organizations that are really modeling what regeneration can mean in different places. And I think that's another element of regeneration that I think is so important, um, is the place-based context, right? Really connecting with the different ecologies and histories, and wisdom, and also the different traumas that exist in different communities, and really being mindful of that and how we move through that.
Yeah, a big thing was I was always hungry. Like I love food. Food is for me like, again, it's life. So I was always looking for something that would satisfy me, but I couldn't because we live in a food swamp, and it's like highly saturated with fast food and convenience stores. And yeah, like I grew up in Fresno in the gang culture, and I knew that that was wrong. So when I turned 18, like I seen this like infomercial, and or this like ad, I guess. And it was, kind of like showing, San Francisco, the California Culinary Academy. And I was like, yeah, this is like my way out, this is my ticket out. So I ended up, moving to San Francisco for a short period of time. I didn't realize, how expensive it was. I never left Fresno. And then, yeah, like it opened up a new world. Unfortunately, I couldn't, survive out there because it was super expensive. I came back down, and I worked in like the hospital, and for 7 years, I worked at Fresno Community, which is a level 1 trauma center, and we just seen so many dead bodies, so many of our people that would you know die, but it was because of their diet. They would have diabetes and high blood pressure, and I wanted to do something about it. Then like I was like 25, and I decided to like open up a food truck. But again, without resources, it's really hard, to try to make something for yourself. So after that tanked, I was looking to work in restaurants, and there wasn't really any like really good restaurants in Fresno. So that kind of led me to Santa Barbara. And when I went to Santa Barbara, like I realized, like we're in a food oasis, and I was just tripping out on how much produce, at the farmers markets were actually from the Central Valley. And I started questioning things like, like one, like what is this vegetable I've never seen before, and like, you know, I had no idea it grew in Fresno, and I'm like, why didn't we know about these vegetables, growing up? So that kind of like drew me back to like, trying to help, create that change, within Fresno, wanting to see, that like my community, maybe attend these farmers markets and actually eat produce and things grown from the valley. But I realized, it was going to be a lot, like harder, because, um, yeah, like we're just, very marginalized, and, we're really disenfranchised here. And we don't have a lot of resources or opportunities, or we don't have a lot of opportunities to actually have these resources. Like we have a lot of like migrant populations that actually have held to their ancestral knowledge, their cultural knowledge, but yet they don't have places or resources to actually like grow vegetables, or they're not able to like own land. So there's just so many different like problems. But just one of the main things that what we're trying to do is we're trying to just basically empower the youth, and also like realize the youth can't do it by themselves. So it's going to take the whole community. But since there's so much like mistrust in the community, the first thing that we have to do is is build trust. So currently that's the angle. Like how can we show up for our community, not just the youth, but the grandparents of the youth, like the mothers, the fathers, um, just everybody in a sense, and kind of like cultivate something that is gonna be sustainable. And yeah, like it's it's pretty beautiful, seeing it happen, seeing as much youth participants as we have, like getting involved with neighborhood gardens and doing like initiatives like guerrilla gardening, and um also how many people that are yoga practitioners or gym enthusiasts, want to give back. We have a huge, I guess, population of people that realize, that health is important, and are actually showing up, for the youth, being like who they needed as a youth, So it's beautiful, just seeing everybody kind of working together, and I see a bright future ahead of us.
Yeah, I'm thinking about Gabi, what you had shared about, working in a community garden and knowing that your family were farmers or had a ranch in Mexico, which is something that my family also shares that story. But just that doing that work in the garden kind of allows you to heal and like reconnect with that relationship that they had with the earth. Just wondering if you would share a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I feel like I take a biology perspective sometimes, with like spirituality. But we're literally like just a bunch of multicellular like cells, organisms just accumulated into this being, and so is the world around us. But I think there's also something beautiful to it, um, that nature is the same, and in a way, we share this like common space and these common cells and structures. So when I do gardening, I just think back of like there's that connection of this structure, the cellular structure is present in a family that I've never met before, thousands of miles away from me. Somehow we are still sharing, being in companionship with nature, growing vegetables or growing a garden or being with animals in that sense. And it just brings me a lot of like solace and peace, and just like almost like a rooting, like a sharing of roots.
I really love that image of just like sharing roots together. And again, just going back to the intention behind this podcast, that we hope this can provide a meeting place, a place to incubate new relationships, new ideas, and uplift, again, those voices and visions from the regenerative communities movement, that we need that reminder that we're not alone. So I'm really, really excited about this journey together, and just appreciating what we've all have shared so far. But I think we might want to see how we want to close up this first episode of the ReGeneration Nation podcast. So also just celebrating that.
Yes, thank you for listening to this episode. We really appreciate you and hope that you tune into our next episode where Jess and I interview Ruben Ilias Canedo, the Director of Strategic Equity Initiatives at UC Berkeley, to learn more about the advocacy work he is doing there. I also wanted to shout out our crowdfunding campaign happening right now. You can play a role in funding resources for regenerative, just, and joyful community-led projects, initiatives, and campaigns. The resources will be distributed in mini grants during the Week of Action, with an emphasis of supporting BIPOC, youth, femme, and frontline community-led efforts. We will also be supporting our emerging student ambassador program, focused on empowering youth to start a regenerative project and foster campus and community collaboration. Donations of any size will have a substantial impact. Everyone that donates will also receive a ReGeneration Nation sticker and will be automatically entered into a drawing to win one of our 2 baskets filled with beautiful arts and books grounded on building regenerative communities. We will include the link to our crowdfunding campaign on this episode description.
Yes, thank you for that reminder, Elvia. So the Week of Action, invite you all again to check out the GoFundMe that Elvia just mentioned. It'll give a little bit of a description, but the Week of Action is going to be kicking off on October 10th, which is Indigenous Peoples Day, and it's going to be a week where we aim to celebrate and uplift ongoing existing work within communities across the country to build more regenerative and just and thriving places. We also want to invite you all to consider this week to initiate a project within your community. And we're going to have all different kinds of inspiration. Again, those stories from across the country, with folks doing amazing work to build community land trusts, start cooperatives, start a conversation around things like reparations. And we're also going to really invite you all to engage via social media to share pictures about what you are doing in community. But I again invite you all to look out for some more info that'll be coming out soon about the Week of Action. And I'm going to pass it over to Gabi, who's going to tell us a little bit about the next R4 workshop.
Yes. So overall, we had the 4 themes that we went over: resist, repair, reimagine, regenerate. And we've been holding workshops every month since March. We're currently shifting. We just had our Reimagine workshop, and you can find that on our YouTube, and the link will be posting it. So next workshop is June 23rd at 5 p.m. and it is our ReGenerate workshop. And here we're just, coming in community with one another and seeing how can we regenerate our community, how can we generate our future going forward. So definitely recommend you joining if you'd like to just be in community with like-minded individuals. And yeah, I think that's about it. Oh, and the books that I just want to highlight, the books that are on the raffle basket. There is Inflamed, Deep Medicine and the Anatomy of Injustice by Rupa Maria and Raj Patel. There is Fresh Banana Leaves, Healing Indigenous Landscapes Through Indigenous Science by Jessica Hernandez. And it's also The Intersectional Environmentalist by Leah Thomas. The book is, at Green Leah on IG, along with Creative Wildfire artwork posters and a t-shirt. So if you want to know more, go ahead and give us a follow on Instagram at transition_US, or follow our Facebook or Twitter. But you can find us most on Insta. So yeah.
Thank you all so much for listening. Tune in to our next podcast.